everyone, and welcome to What's Wrong with the Podcast. Today, we're delighted to be talking to Jason Naylor. Jason is an award-winning artist, designer, and creative director based in Brooklyn. After earning a BFA in graphic design from Brigham Young University, Jason moved to NYC to immerse himself into the life, color, and magic of New York. He began his professional career working in the creative department of MAC Cosmetics, where he learned about the business of art and design and developed his taste for spreading life and color into any and every project he could get his hands on. 6 years later, Jason set out to start spreading his own message into the world. Jason's work consists of bright colors and rich blacks and regularly contains messages of love and positivity, as he believes that kindness is key to success. He works in both digital and traditional media, and while his work ranges from typography and illustration to products and large-scale murals, the immediately recognizable commonalities found in his work are his electric color palette and his positivity. Jason's work has received global recognition, including the Golden Novum Design Award and 2 clear bronze medals. Jason's work has received global recognition, including the Golden Novum Design Award and 2 clear bronze medals. It has been featured in numerous publications and blogs, and he has been featured on HGTV and the Discovery Channel. In 2018, Jason was named by Bumble as one of the 100 most inspiring New Yorkers, and his upbeat, colorful creations have found partnership with a range of brands such as Coach, Pepsi, Guess, Xbox, and Maybelline. Jason, welcome.
Thank you.
It's such a treat to have you today. Please tell us more about yourself and how you became the artist that you are today.
Well, it's a treat to be here. Thanks for having me. My name is Jason, and I'm an artist and a designer. And I focus on message-driven visual work. I sometimes I like to call myself a champion of kindness, and I don't like use that too publicly because I don't want to be like, I am a champion, you know. But I do say that because I think the driving force behind my work is the message of kindness, love, positivity, stuff like that. And so I try to use that as a compass for all the decision making, all the creative decisions that go into my work. So my work, you can recognize it, is very fluorescent, colorful, loud. It's very energetic. I think it's very whimsical. And all of those creative decisions that I make are driven by my goal to spread love, spread kindness. And so I think bright colors and this loud, splashy designs that I do, I think they all support the message. The message is the priority for me. So I got here by starting out my professional career studying graphic design in college. I went to Brigham Young University in Utah. We can totally go back and talk about Utah and all the things that come along with that on another part of the conversation. But the important part of it is to say that I studied to be a designer. I came to New York and started working as a designer. And over the course of 5 or 6 years, I began to realize and feel like I was doing work for the growth and like the betterment of the brand that I worked for. And it was less for me and for myself. Mm-hmm. And so I started to, feel like I needed to break out and do my own thing. And I wanted to put my name on things and, so to speak, like I yes, of course I wanted to like sign my work, but I wanted to do work that was my work. And even if it was for another company or a brand or a client or an agency, I wanted it to be my own voice, my own style. And I was really like needing that. So I quit my job. I thought I was going to be a full-time freelance designer. I thought I would be doing branding and graphics and illustrations and stuff like that. And over the years, it kind of evolved into me doing more art. That's sort of what has picked up. And I still do a lot of design work, which is why I call myself a designer. I think my art is very design driven, but for the most part, I do art. And that kind of leads me to talking about street art, which has kind of blown up for me in the past 4 or 5 years as I've started to put my art on the street and put it out into the public. And that's sort of like what has become now my thing. 1, because I love it, and 2, because everyone else seems to like it, at least a little bit. And so here we are.
Yes. And first of all, I'm so glad you quit your job and you're doing your own thing, because your pieces are so memorable. And I mean, the style, it works because, you know, you're trying to give out a message, and because you have such a memorable style, that message also sticks. So if you had never quit your job and, you know, decided to pursue your own way, we wouldn't have seen those beautiful things out in the streets or in the world. So I'm so glad you did that.
Thank you.
So I do want to go back to giving a message. Like we do always, I mean, you know, we're in the architecture and design space, and for us also, you know, anything in the built environment, how we see it is like, it's a great way of raising awareness, starting a conversation, inspiring people, right? It's actually a great platform. It's a canvas on its own. And I think, you know, street artists really utilize that canvas to start a conversation, or even raise awareness about a subject, or even remind us about kindness, right? So what do you think, you know, as an artist who's sort of like driven with a mission to do that, what do you think of the art space in general, whether you want to focus on street art or, you know, art in general, in it having a mission? Like, do you see that it's a common thing, or can the field itself do much better, or can you be more powerful and have more impact on society? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think that art is always has a cause and a mission, and it's always driven by something. But I don't know if we see it always. I don't know if we understand it always.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like artists, you know, maybe the age-old struggle of being an artist is trying to communicate or express yourself in a way that other people will understand. You know, the misunderstood artist type.
Yeah.
That, I mean, that the stereotype exists for a reason, and it's because, in my opinion, artists have a mission. Well, people have a mission, but artists have a mission. They want to communicate. They want to be heard. They want to be understood, and they're struggling to get what's in here, or what's in their head, in their heart,
Mm-hmm.
onto the page in a way that someone else will then be able to take to heart and, you know, to mind. And so to me, it's a communication breakdown. I think that there's always a mission. I think there's always the desire to be heard and understood and loved, you know. And but I think that as a culture, we don't always interpret it, we don't always understand it, and we may not be seeking to understand it either, you know. Right. My work is very in your face, and it's very cerebral. It's very clear what the message is because I actually write the message in the design.
Yeah.
But not everyone does that, and that's not to say they're not communicating. I think they may be screaming to be heard. But I think the question of whether we're hearing is a really good one.
That's a really good point, and it actually brings the conversation to sort of access, right? Accessibility almost in communication. Like street art is one of the most accessible forms of art, but so much of art is not.
Right.
Maybe like one silver lining of, you know, this pandemic would be trying to make art more accessible by making it also digital everywhere.
Yeah.
But we also know that, you know, that doesn't mean that it will still be accessible everywhere. So what are your thoughts in terms of, I think it's really interesting you brought up, you know, there's a way of like the artists themselves, you know, trying to communicate, but how they're communicating may not be accessible. What do you think about the platform or medium that the artists have? Like street art probably is the most accessible form of it, but what do you think art in general being accessible?
Well, I mean, accessibility is part of it, but I think it's interesting you brought up the style of communication, the language, the vocabulary. You know, it's like you go to the doctor and you get a diagnosis, and they could tell you actually what's happening using their vocabulary, and you would understand nothing. Yeah. Or they could like communicate what's happening in layman's terms, and neither mean that one person is smarter or more educated or anything. I think maybe like young doctors might use their vocabulary too much to show off how smart they are or whatever. Yeah. But my point is like, it's just a matter of like being on the same page and having the same tools, having the same language, having the same, you know, it's like speaking the same language. So my point is, I think accessibility is part of it. I think the means of communication is also a part of it as well. But going back to accessibility, street art is extremely accessible, but the internet in general, like Instagram, social media, that provides so much accessibility to, to art and to people to see art, that I think that's the bigger platform. Like the internet is the platform, really. And I think it's important to also note that like street art multiplied by the internet becomes like the ultimate platform, because you see something on the street, or you put something on the street, someone else sees it, likes it, wants to share it, then they do a selfie or take a picture, and then they put it on their platform, which is going to be some place on the internet, probably Instagram or whatever. Then that gets multiplied as it goes out to their audiences, people reshare. And so I think that it's the combination of those things that make it so big. Street art by itself would be limited to the people who walk down that exact street if it weren't for the internet. But the internet would be empty if it weren't for things to put on it.
Right. That's true. And also, to your point, I always I like the street arts that always grab my attention are the ones that either have like a very clear message like yours, or that have like maybe someone in the history that in the center of it, from the history in the center of it, and then some other like abstractions around it, or telling, so you clearly know that it's telling a story, or it's like raising awareness about someone. And when events happen in the world that are saddening, we see that suddenly accumulating everywhere, and we saw that during Black Lives Matters too, right? And
yes.
And to your point, when that is combined with digital, suddenly, when people start seeing all these things in one neighborhood, maybe something happened there, or one city, someone from Middle East or Europe or Africa can also see that and maybe relate to it, because they might be going through a similar issue there, or they're exposed to it, right? So it's like both working as like a big awareness tool, or a tool that bonds people together, because they kind of are going through the same thing, or are appreciating the same message at the same time. So it's such a powerful connector and an awareness tool in that sense. But you're right, when it actually also combines with social media and digital platforms. And because it has that ability, do you think, now I'm like more inclined to, whenever I see something that is trying to like raise awareness or trying to give out a message, I'm always more inclined to share that, rather than just like something that I perceive that looks nice. Maybe it's just a pattern, but maybe, to your point, the artist is actually trying to communicate something, but I'm not getting it. So do you think in that sense, because it's also such a potential powerful awareness tool, what we see on the streets, do you think should be both, like message driven, but also maybe engaging more people, or like facts? What do you think?
Well, that's such an interesting thing to notice, because if you look at art as aesthetic, then you realize how subjective it is. Like the reason I focus on the message more than the aesthetic of my own work is because it's messages that resonate, it's stories that resonate with people, and aesthetics resonate with people as well. But that can be very limiting, because it's so subjective, that if you're trying to create a message that resonates based on the aesthetic, you're going to limit the number of people who will also feel that vibration of the resonation based on the aesthetic. If it's based on a message, a story, or a thought, or an idea, I think it's pretty generally safe to say that way more people are going to understand that message, is going to resonate with a huge crowd of people. And once the message resonates, the visual portion of the art, the aesthetic portion of the art, falls into place. Like, if you like the story, it almost doesn't matter if like the clouds are pink or blue or yellow, or if the lightning bolt is pink or white, or like all these creative decisions that are made that go into designing the aesthetic of it become irrelevant, because the story rings true to you. So if you see something on a wall and the message grabs you, and you agree with the message, you're going to tell yourself that you like the way it looks. It's a psychological thing, you know, it's like a mind game.
Right.
Because you like the story, you're like, I like the pictures, you know. If you didn't like the story, it would be harder to like the pictures, right?
Right. Right.
So I'm fascinated with this too, because I've learned in my own work that like I could take one message, let's call it spread love. Most people are going to say, that's a great message, I like it. And so in a way, you've already won them over without even doing the art yet, or without even doing the design. So now it doesn't matter what the design looks like. I could take a pencil and just scribble it, and people would still like it. Or I could spend years creating this colorful piece of perfection that to me is this masterpiece, but it would on Instagram get the same number of likes as the pencil sketch, because it's the message that matters, you know?
Right. You're almost like communicating the message in your own style.
Yeah.
Right.
So so my point is that the aesthetics become irrelevant. The message and the story is what matters. And for artists who rely on aesthetic only, I think that's a difficult place to be. I'm not saying it's a bad place to be. I can only speak for what I do, obviously, and my work is message driven. I think whatever messages are hidden in the art, the abstract art of an artist who is creating aesthetically driven art, I think that's probably a very layered message that you might have to understand a lot about the person to understand what they're trying to say. And I think that's really great too. For this particular application, putting art on the street with messages, to answer your question, like, should we be putting more messaging or telling more stories in our work? I mean, I say yes, because I love to do messages. It could lean on advertising or propaganda. You know, if you start putting a message, like repeating it, even if it's spread love, put spread love on every building in America, on every corner in America. That's propaganda.
Exactly. And also, I guess, like, to your point, when you're trying to, I guess, if the goal is to raise awareness about something or trying to share a message, you kind of, as an artist, have the responsibility to find a medium that is accessible and relatable, at least, so people can receive that. I mean, it's one thing that, you know, maybe you're depicting a personal memory of yours in something, and it's very abstracted. Some people may not get it, or you need to view it with audio information at a museum. Like, that's one thing. But I guess if it's like a message like spread love, or if you're trying to raise awareness about someone's death, like if it's really like driven with awareness, or like, having catching people's attention in order to sort of make them even feel that for a second, I guess it's almost like the artist's responsibility. Like, how do I communicate this clearly? You can do it in your own style, as you said, and as you connect the message, they will respect the style. Even if they don't love it, they will still like it. So it's really interesting that you mentioned that. And I guess it's sort of then lies on to, because we always, it's I don't want to say we envy the art space, but it's kind of like, as in architecture, the architect is kind of in a crisis, especially in this like setup of how architects do business, that they're not in control of their own medium, right? So they may do a design, the structural engineer might say one thing, whoever's cost engineering might say one thing, the developer might say one thing, the bank might say one thing, and then suddenly you're like, what did my design become, in the end? But an artist has the liberty to create anything and say, this is my art, you like it or not, right? But then I guess you don't have that liberty if your goal is to raise awareness, right?
Well, to me, that's the difference between art and design. And, design, the goal of design is to communicate. And so effective communication is crucial to the effectiveness of the design. It's not a good design if it doesn't effectively communicate what it's intended to communicate. Right. Art, on the other hand, is meant to, this is a very broad way to say it, but art is meant to express. So I could, and that's a very abstract thing. Like you can't, it's harder to communicate, anger or like fear or loneliness without a bunch of words in a design. It's easy to express anger or fear or loneliness in a piece of art because you can do it any way you want. I can rip the canvas in half, and that's a piece of art because I was expressing anger,
right.
And that's both accepted and understood, as long as maybe I put a little title card next to it that says anger or something, and that's good enough. And I'm not dumbing it down. I'm saying that's a higher level, Design has requirements.
Yeah.
and then enter the commercial portion of it. And we can talk about this, like commercial art is the same way. Commercial design, commercial art, you bring on a client, now you have communication, you have objective, you have goals, you have fees, budgets. Now you have all these criteria that have to be met as you're creating. And those are basically just limitations. Now your creativity is channeled into this little like path that has all these barriers around it. And so you have to work within those constraints. And that to me is design. Art doesn't have constraints, design does. Design generally has a paycheck at the end of it. Art sometimes has a massive paycheck at the end of it, sometimes has nothing at the end of it. So they're very different things, but to me, merging those is what works. Understanding how design works, understanding the need to communicate effectively and for the audience to receive the message, like that, having that skill set works for me in my art because I can use them together.
Right. That's such a great point. And, we always kind of struggle in the definition of like, what is art? But I think what you just said in terms of like express versus communicate, like that's really interesting. I never thought of it in that sense. And now I'm going to totally, quote you on that. If I get angry office and break my computer, I'm just going to put a Post-it next to it and say, this is art.
Sign it. I mean, Marcel Duchamp put his signature, not even his own name, on a toilet, and look at what happened.
That's so great. I think like what you just said in terms of also, communicating, and this, you can either be restricted, or like in design, you can either be restricted in like a commercial space or by a client or something like design requirements, whether that's structural or whatever it is. But do you think the artist, I don't want to say restricted, but should be called upon more in terms of like going back to like artist responsibilities to collaborate and include more? Because art and any creative space really is a great platform to collaborate, and the more we collaborate, the more we actually are able to create great pieces, or raise awareness on something, or share responsibilities, engage audiences that are generally not included. But also it is a space where we see a lot of, like you said, like mega names, right? And this is not only in just like art world, that you see like there's a term architects, right? Or there's like fashion designers who are in their ivory towers. But we more and more feel, and I mean, we are a studio that is has a mission to address social and urban problems, so we don't think like that. But there are certainly so many people out there that are like that, and I'm not dissing them or anything, but it's their own style. But do you think, given the times that we're in too, we have more and more responsibility to be more inclusive and be open to collaborate? Either designers or artists.
Well, I'm always in favor of collaboration. I think the collaboration, first of all, it multiplies the audience, right?
Yeah.
So it's effective because everybody who follows me in my work, everyone who follows you in your work, now my people see your work, your people see my work. So there's that. Then there's also that forcing yourself, or figuring out how, forcing yourself is a bad way to say it, figuring out how to work with another person is a really rewarding process, and you grow from it, and you often walk away with something new, a new skill, a new idea, a new thought, a new feeling that you could use in your future practice. So I think that it's always a great thing to do for that reason as well. And then in terms of like the public, should architects work with artists, and should designers collaborate with other types of artists? When I say artists, I think visual artists because I'm a visual artist, but artist means so many things too. Like a sound designer could collaborate with a dancer or something. Like there's so many interpretations of what I'm saying, but I think that it's huge for collaborations to happen. And even now, when maybe like the economy is not so great and there's not a lot of money, people still need to go out, they need to speak to other people, they need to see color, even though, like, psychologically speaking, the well-being of the human race Like
Right.
we need color. We need to see things. We need variety. Like, and art, I think, provides that. And art and architecture, the collaboration of architects bringing on artists and creating aesthetic, beautiful, colorful things that people go see, I think is so important to the well-being of our culture. So my answer is yes, always collaborate.
Yeah. Okay, great. I mean, which is also why we're on the podcast, right? Because any solution ends up with like collaboration, like great collaborations even drive innovation. So we always
Mm-hmm.
vouch for that. But also, I want to touch upon what you just said on well-being. I think, as you said, art can be perceived as something very like aesthetic or beautiful or nice, but not necessarily crucial for people, and what we see crucial is like food, shelter, all of those like necessities. But we're humans and we have actually higher needs, and art actually caters to so much of that. And there's a huge difference, and I want to give a shout out to a piece of work you did here where, because of protests, people putting up, extra walls on their storefront to not get damages in the store, is seeing that as one thing, and it definitely has a negative connotation right away. Or seeing a beautiful artwork instead of that, it just like plain wall, is one thing, and the perception around it is totally different. So the mental implications and how it makes you feel in that moment is drastically different, and is so important for mental health and well-being in general. So can you speak a little bit more on, I guess, art's impact? Like why is it actually a necessity for human beings?
Well, it's interesting you brought up the plywood on the storefronts, because like there are certain things that we need, and one of the basic human necessities, food, water, like you were talking about, right? Shelter is one of those things. But then we take our shelter and we cover it in decoration. It becomes
Yeah.
an aesthetic thing for us. So it's not all houses look the same. The reason architects, well, one of the many reasons why architects have a job is because people want to design, or people care about the way their shelter looks. What
Yeah.
is the point of a building? It's like shelter, right?
Yeah.
It's a place to be covered from whatever. And so, but why does it matter what it looks like? It matters because we, as human beings, we need to see variety. We need to see color. We need to go from one place to another. For our mental and psychological well-being, we have to have these basic things. And you can dive deep into the psychology of color. I would advocate for the fact that human beings need to see color in order to be sane. And I think this is like big for what you do as well, because like you know, like designing these spaces, what you're really doing is creating shelter for people. So when the storefronts are boarded up, yes, you might look at it and think, oh, that's so sad. Like they don't want their stuff to get stolen, so they have boards in
Yeah.
front. But what they're really doing is protecting what's inside. That's sheltering. And the shelter now becomes a platform for decor, for aesthetic.
Yeah.
And that's something that's been happening as long as we can remember, right? Like we go all the way back to 2,000 years ago. Who was decorating what on the outside of their cave, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not a historian, so don't yell at me, but you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that, first of all, I'm not surprised that, of course, the city is covered with art, because now all of a sudden there's these shelters that were put up that are campuses. The same way that if you
Mm-hmm.
went in and built 150 tract houses that were all white, before long they'd all be painted a different color.
Yeah.
It's the same thing to me.
I mean, I think more. I mean, I'm sure so many people would relate to what you say anyway, but I feel like it's sort of undeniable after being in a lockdown for months, right? Like the fact that, suddenly everything that made New York City exciting suddenly became unbearable, like just buildings without people in it, and not seeing green, so to speak, in terms of a color that we actually need, right? Like that
Mm-hmm.
started to wear on people. And there are so many people that are way unluckier than all of us just complaining about being in a lockdown. But in terms of like what are the implications on mental health, and not being in a shelter, so to speak, without the colors you need in the world, um, even one of the most exciting cities in the world suddenly becomes very meaningless,
Yeah.
right? And before we wrap up, I would love to hear what do you want to say to people who are super passionate about something, want to follow that? Maybe they're scared, maybe they're discouraged, but maybe they come from a environment that they don't see role models that actually do that. So they're discouraged in that sense. Or maybe they just got started and it's really hard because, as you said, it is the hard way to sort of get paid for what you love, and maybe it takes a lot of time. So what type of advice would you give to all of the above?
Well, I mean, first of all, I would say that you have to put in the work. Nothing comes easy, and it does seem hard. Whatever is in front of you, like whatever you want to do or be, whatever you're working on becoming, it always seems hard. Even for me, like the things that I have to accomplish today, they feel hard. They feel scary. They feel like I might not be able to do it. Like, I don't know how I'm going to do that tomorrow. I have that feeling still. So it's always going to be like that, and that's fine. You have to be okay with that, and you have to put in the work. You've got to just keep drawing, keep writing, keep designing, keep creating. Whatever it is that you do, you just have to keep doing it. And that's easy to say, it's hard to do. And so that's why that's the advice. That's why there's a benefit to that. If there were shortcuts, then people would take them, but it's not how it works.
Yeah.
So to sum it up, I would say, whatever it is that you make, whatever it is that you do, you have to just keep doing it.
That is true. I mean, I know it's like easy to say, but at the same time, keeping at it is something that we have to like hear all the time, especially at the times that we're discouraged or things feel hard. And I think hearing that from people who we admire and respect their work and feel like they have accomplished something, seeing that everybody goes through the same thing in the end, there is no shortcut really. We just have to keep at it. I think it's very valuable.
Totally. Yeah. And then the other thing that I would say, and like I know that this is sort of lives within the world of my own propaganda, my own messages, But I think that it's important for people to remember to believe in themselves. Like, believe in yourself is a message that I like to use in my work, but it's an important message because doubt is so crippling. And what you were just talking about goes back to doubt and fear and all of these negative emotions that can stand in the way of getting from point A to point B. And so in a way to sum it up, believing in yourself is the important thing to do. You have to tell yourself every morning, like, I can do it. I have fear. Tomorrow is going to be difficult. I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And that's even worse,
Right.
But I will be okay, and I will do it. And I believe in myself. Like, you've got to have that dialogue happening, and regularly, daily, hourly, however much it takes to keep doing what you've got to keep doing every day. And so those two things, I think, live together. Keep doing whatever it is you're doing, keep doing it, then do some more, then do it again, and then keep doing it. And the whole time, you got to believe in yourself.
I love that. So I guess one last thing that I would like to ask, anything you would like to share that is upcoming for Jason Naylor, or any type of collaborations or things that you came across recently that you think are really cool and you want to give a shout out to?
Let's see. Well, this is a little premature, so I'm hesitant to say much about it.
Okay.
But since we were talking, some of the things we were talking about today are very in line with this project. And I have a book coming out in January, which I've written. It has my art and my thoughts and my messages. So I would love for people to be on the lookout for that. I don't want to say too much more about it, but coming January, a book from me.
That's perfect. Thank you so much, Jason. This was amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
That is this week's episode of What's Wrong with the Podcast. Make sure to visit our website, podcast.what'swrongwith.xyz, and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Google Podcasts so you never miss an episode. If you found value in this show, we would appreciate if you could head over to iTunes to rate and leave a review, or you can simply tell your friends about the show. For more details on our guests, follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Links can be found in the episode description. Don't forget to join us next week. Thank you for listening.